Okie doke. Hi, everybody. I've been really putting off wanting to do some kind of astro blasts, star circles, what have you, and finally Mercury's direct, and I feel like I can actually make it happen after weeks of just like waking myself up in the middle of the night with like obnoxious astrological observations. So excuse my disorganization, potentially bad lighting, angles. My dog is compulsively licking the bed. There's someone outside of my window selling stuff, like pumping some cool tunes from their car. So, it's just a normal Friday. But I'm going to try and keep this short. I think we'll probably just talk about outer planets right now. And hopefully this is accessible whether you have astro knowledge or not. I'll try not to get too caught up in the jargon and stuff like that, and try to actually just talk about what's going on in terms of how it feels for me. So we'll just see how that goes. So my notes are such a mess, and that's okay. So if you'd like to, this isn't live because I think it's gonna be better for me to do it this way, better quality. So if you'd like to join us, if you'd like to and feel able to join us here in non-local space-time, you can either sit, close your eyes, move, whatever, as we do a little call in here. And if you'd like, you can turn and find the directions where you are in your actual physical space. So starting with the east. I'll just build us a little container here to do some work together. So I call out to the spirits of the east. I call out to air and all your many forms and manifestations. And I ask you to flow here with us. Help us to understand your essence. Help us to breathe deeply and easily and clearly. Help us to feel the weight and the gravity of ideas and of knowledge when that is necessary. And help us to also feel the lightness and the levity. Help us to laugh at the things that sometimes feel heavy. Help us to find those places where our identities and our thought forms and the ways in which knowledge flows in our lives can soften a little bit, can be a little less restrictive, a little less fixed. With love and gratitude, I welcome you, spirits of the east. I call out to the spirits of the south. I call out to fire, ancient elder, and I ask you to be here with us, burn brightly here in the center of this circle. Help us to have a really strong and robust and radiant container so that we can just gain a little bit here. Maybe lose a little bit that needs to be lost, transform a little bit that needs to be transformed, or just get a better understanding of where we are. Help us to do that thing that you've done so well throughout human history in giving us a light and a heat and a beacon so that we can find each other and find ourselves and just know where we are, at least for the night or the day. With love and gratitude, I welcome you, spirits of the south. I turn my heart to the west and I call out to you, spirits of the west, all those that guard this space. Spirit of water, please flow through us and with us in this work. Help me to really understand the flow necessary to feel those deep, watery movements in my bowels, in my belly, in my sacred creative centers, in that deep, watery moon place. And feel how they move with other things. Feel how that sense of flow is one aspect of how we're also connected. We flow with the larger currents. We flow with the larger rhythms. Help us to do that in a good way. And help us to flow while also staying true to ourselves and true to our essence, so that we don't just flow for flow's sake, but actually flow as necessary, flow truthfully and with integrity. With love and gratitude, I welcome you, spirits of the west. And I call out to the spirits of the north. I call out to earth, earth element, northern guardians and watchtowers. Please be here with us and hold this space. Help us to have a really strong and firm and robust container. Help us to understand what it is to be solid, what it is to be manifest, what it is to take form. And help us to understand that even that, which seems so timeless, is still temporary and is still finite in some way. And help us to understand those deeper, more geological movements and transits and currents that would ask our lives to ground into that rhythm and ground into that place of real belonging, belonging in form. Help us to belong in our bodies. With love and gratitude, I welcome you, spirits of the north. And as those energies and all the other beings and energies that would gather around us come into circle here, I call out to each of our ancestors, all those who lived well and died well, all those true ancestral helping spirits that know what it is to be of a place and of a time, that know what it is to use the stars and work with larger cosmic and terrestrial currents in order to locate ourselves and to make better choices, to be better humans, to be more of ourselves. I call out to the spirits of the land and the great spirits of this land where I reside here in Kansas City. And I call out to all those land spirits, if any who are joining us non-locally at another time. And I ask you to just lean in and give us a good solid foundation, because you know that if we are better humans, we'll probably work in harmony with you better. And so help us to do that. Help us to really do this work in a way that's good for all life. And I invite each of you to gather yourself back into your own center. Imagine just winding up a ball of yarn that is your energy and all that is anything you're responsible for. And just pull that back into yourself from the past and the present and the future. And as you come into your center, I invite you to just drop an anchor and allow your imagination to just let that anchor of your energy drop all the way down to the center of the earth, just like a ship dropping anchor, so quickly, so solidly. Let it clunk. You might even hear it clunk down there at that true yin point of the heart of the earth, that deep energetic center that is the core of this planet that we live on, assuming you live on this planet with me. And allow that energy of the earth to just flow up, and imagine it is just as a spring that just gives itself so generously. We don't need to think about anything relative to the relationship right now. Just allow the earth to resource you. Act as if that were always true and happening. And as you receive that resourcing from the earth into your body, let it cleanse and tonify and purify. Let it stabilize. Let it bring more solidity and form. More of that sense of belonging in the body, in this space and time. And allow that energy that blossoms within you to open like a flower and just reach up and out and receive the energy of the cosmos, the energy of the sky, the stars, the moons, all the moons, the planets, all the planets, all the suns that orbit or that have planets orbiting them. And allow the energy of the highest power, that true yang sense of radiance, that highest point of divinity that's not better, that's not dominant, it's just up versus down. It's just the complement to that true yin at the center of the earth and at the center of each planet. And allow those great legendary lovers of earth and sky, yin and yang, heavens and underworld to mix and mingle within you. Let the light and dark flow equally within you and flow to that natural rhythm and quality and quantity that they so intelligently already know they should be at. Let them soak into your head and your heart and your belly. Let them bring more clarity through your center, more ease of receptivity and more strength and groundedness so that you can hold the boundaries you need. You can receive what you need and release what you don't. And to these energies above and below and all around us, I give deep honoring and gratitude and thanks. May what needs to be said be said, may what needs to be heard, and may these proceedings go forward in a way that is good and true and beautiful for all life. Okay, so what the hell is going on? Actually, before I talk about that, as I fix my hair, let's talk about astrology in general. Because I haven't really done one of these that's specific to astrology, and I just fucking love astrology, and that's kind of what's calling me into doing this right now, is just this deep curiosity of like what this form, why this is one of the forms that really keeps me up at night. Like I'm so obsessed with all these other things that I study and teach, but I just love astrology. So on one hand, one piece of context is my shamanic teachers have presented that in certain cultures that we would call shamanic or indigenous or animist, those are not the same thing, but in their overlap, you find where this great range of specialization in terms of people that do the spirit work for the people. You know, from the most basic general public, where almost everyone in cultures like this has, like, you know, a direct working relationship with spirit in some way, which is very different than our current culture. But then you have all these degrees of specialization that come out of different trainings or different initiations, you know, whether those are like kind of fated and, you know, or inherited from family lineage, or they just are spontaneous, whatever, a calling. And so I love that oftentimes there's this degree of, if you can't make it all the way to becoming like a healer or shaman or something like that, you end up, everyone though does learn divination and has like a tool of divination. And there's like an example of this, I'm fairly ignorant of this tradition, but the Sangoma tradition of the Zulu people in what's now South Africa, where you move through this very, you know, long-standing current of training to become a Sangoma, and everyone learns first the divination forms. And I think it's like a cowrie shell kind of thing, where you're casting different objects on like a map and you're deciding through that, you know, like sort of like how we would read tarot or read runes or whatever. And I love the idea that even the highest degree of Sangoma has to have that divinatory form. And some people just eddy out there and are like, oh, I'm really into the divination aspect of this, and that's just, or some people just don't make it through the training, whatever it is. And so I was thinking of that, and I love tarot. It's been really important for me at times in my life. I always thought I wanted to read runes because, you know, I have a lot of Germanic ancestry, and I thought that was appropriate. I have runes tattooed on my body, but I was like, none of that stuff has ever spoken to me to the degree that astrology does. And so for me, the thing that I come to in the moment when my primary divinatory forms, which for me now is shamanic journeying and stuff like that, when those aren't working, or when I have really big blind spots around certain things, love, money, and relationships. And so the divinatory form that I go to, that I grab the most, is astrology. And that's been really interesting for me, because in our contemporary culture, we tend to think of astrology as sort of this be-all, end-all, where it's like it's such a thing in and of itself. And to one degree it is, but to another degree I'd like to present the option that it's not, that it's actually just a divinatory form, which is huge in some sense, but is also fairly simple. It's just a way to locate yourself in place and time. Particularly astrology is really good at locating yourself in the time space, versus tarot, where it's like, you know, it's a different tradition, different use of that. But it's also about just getting a sense of like, what the hell's going on? Spirit, getting a different perspective, you know, getting the perspective of the divine. It's one of those tools that we've been given by spirit, I believe, in order to, at least metaphorically, in order to mediate between the human world and the divine, which, you know, the divine world is just like, it's like everything that we have just without bodies, you know what I mean? It's just like the spirit world is just the totality of everything with, and the organizational systems like astrology, I think, are actually given for us as humans, more for our benefit than anything else. I don't think there's like a big hierarchy. I don't think that like spirit world is organized by the zodiac or something like that. But another thing I wanted to say about astrology is that it is not causative, or at least my understanding is that it is not causative. And so a lot of times we get in this weird sort of, like right now in this contemporary climate, there's a lot of like science versus blank debates. And I think that those do a lot of injustice to science in general. And we could talk about where those are coming up in terms of the astrology right now later, but I really don't think it's about science versus. I think science is actually a really cool tool, similar to a divinatory system, that doesn't need to be a belief system. And I think if you're basing your belief system on science, then you might actually be basing your belief system on like Judeo-Christian stuff and not really realizing it. Because scientism comes out of the Judeo-Christian tradition. It's very dogmatic, very belief-focused. It's about the beliefs versus the actual effects of your actions, which is very Protestant. Versus, from my understanding, science is a tool via which we come to understand what we're engaging with in the world, what, you know, through direct observation and through rigorous community-held, peer-reviewed research. It's not about creating beliefs, and it's not about actually creating facts or like rights or wrongs. It actually, you know, science is not very good at telling us what's right or wrong. It can certainly tell us what happened, but we actually don't really know why a water molecule creates ice when it freezes versus a methane molecule doing the thing that it does when it freezes. You know what I mean? Like there's not a why there. It's a how and it's a what. So I think we should like get our questions. I think I don't really ask a lot of whys, to be honest, because it's like that just leads me into a crazy tunnel of like why? Well, why the fuck is there a universe? I don't know. So when we pit science against astrology or anything's vaguely spiritual, like they both kind of lose. I don't think that's a healthy. I think it's a false dichotomy. But what I would say is that I see a lot of popular astrology. We have this sense popularly where we talk about it in a causative way, where the planets caused me to do this. I don't think it's that either. If something's causing you to do something, if there's like a prime mover and we are all just rutting around in some preordained destiny, I don't understand that. I don't understand the why or the how of that even. And I don't think it really matters. So I'm gonna take that off the table. I look for correlation, which does not necessarily mean causation, which is actually quite scientific, because just because a bunch of people that got blank, you know, that took blank drug had exhibited these blank systems, you can't just say from one study, oh, that's what caused it. That's a you know, any true scientist is going to tell you correlation does not necessarily mean causation. So I would say let's leave astrology just at the correlation. Look at the planets in terms of astrology and how we're using it as a divinatory tool, as a map. And what they're awesome about is that the orbits of the planets don't change, you know what I mean, like so visibly for us. They've been observed for a really long time. They do change, obviously. Science can tell us that. But they're changing pretty slowly. And so the orbits of the planets, just through direct observation, many cultures, many thousands or more years of direct observation feeding into what we've now inherited as this Western astrological system, which coheres pretty well to the Eastern astrologies, you know, given the fact that they were actually all in communication for several thousand years, you know, via trade routes and stuff like that. But all of that to say, this is just a way of understanding the forces that are ruling everything. Mars does not make me, my Mars being in Aries doesn't make me get angry in a certain way. That is a way for me to map the flow of my anger, challenge, my Mars, you know, the flow of that energy that we're using Mars as a placeholder for. And Aries is another way to map the flow of energy as it sort of refracts throughout existence, throughout everything that is. So I understand these energies of the zodiac, the planets, the houses, even, like all of it is just, you know, it's all one energy and if you're just like engaging it as the oneness, it's pretty complex. It's like, you know what I mean? Your mind blows up. You take too much acid, that's what happens. Or certain other things. Speaking from experience. But if you have a system like astrology, so I have the houses, the planets, the signs, then I can say, oh, this was where Mars was. You know, it's as random as throwing the dice, or, you know, imagine pulling a bunch of tarot cards at the moment of my birth. You would never pull that exact sequence again. Just like the planets would never quite be in that exact sequence again. You may, if you did it 365 days a year, every time someone was born, you might start to notice patterns. That's what we're using the planets for. We're noticing patterns, but the planets themselves are not the originator. I hope I'm making that clear. But feel free to ask me questions in the comments or the DMs or whatever, and we can talk more about it. But that being said, what's really interesting about the way that I'm receiving astrology right now is that I find that I can do the best work when I actually do engage the planets directly as if they are conscious and as if they are beings and spirited in some way. And so it's a very complex thing, because I'm understanding that in my shamanic practice, for example, we work with archetypes, We work with spirits, like personal helping spirits, ancestral helping spirits, stuff like that. We don't do a lot of deity work, though there are people in my cosmology, or in my communities, etc., in my student communities, and that are working with deities, and my teachers too. So it's not to say that there's anything wrong with working with deities, but we understand that deities are rooted in a tradition, and deities like tend to like sort of come with a certain degree of baggage, versus like an archetype that's sort of like pre-deity. So like warrior would be the archetype. Mars would be one expression of that. But the planets, but I don't think Mars is a pure warrior. And that's the thing. The planets are complex because they're not deities. It's not just Mars, the Roman war god. So it's not limited to that, though some of the myths and stories about the planets have a lot to tell us about the astrology. But it's not limited to that. And that's been very interesting for me to really discover. Because as I'm engaging, a lot of my practices, I basically just cast a circle or just kind of, I'm walking down the street and I'm like, Saturn, what the fuck is going on with my life right now? What do I need to do to make this not suck so bad? And this energy of Saturn is available to me because I do a lot of spirit work. So I am like resourced in actually engaging with some degree of integrity and like, you know, a nice degree of skepticism about my interpretation of what Saturn is telling me. And he's not just Saturn, the myth. It's not just Saturn, the deity. He's not actually really relative to that tradition at all. But he is willing to wear those clothes for me. So that's a really interesting little thing that I'm still kind of learning to parse out. Because in terms of like archetypal energies, I see Saturn as carrying the energy of teacher, father, and death, you know, and also farmer. Like they're which is kind of actually teacher in some sense. So it's really interesting the way that these energies of these planets are, you know, we're using them as markers. I don't even know if it has anything to do with the planet itself, because certainly I engage directly with the energy of the Earth, but I don't really know if the planet Saturn actually gives a flying fuck about me, because if there's life on that planet, it's nothing like human life whatsoever. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to flatter myself to think that it's actually Saturn, the planet. So I don't actually know who it is, but I do know that it is an energy that is conscious, that is aware of me, that I can work with directly, that lives within a complete cosmology, even if I don't know the full bounds or organization of that cosmology. You know, because the solar system is actually quite vast, and it's actually, there's so many things. I only read like 5 asteroids and the lunar nodes, and that's kind of where I leave it. You know, like I'm not like Demetra George reading like 40 million asteroids. But it works for her too to do that. So it's just one of those things where I'm just really curious about this way of doing astrology. I don't know if there's anyone else doing this. I don't really care. It works for me. I like it. I enjoy it. And I really do, I appreciate my relationship with this energy that is identifying itself to me as Saturn, Mars. These two tend to rule my chart. You know, if you looked at my chart, you would understand that. So I talk to them the most, but they all seem equally available to me. So so that's where I'm coming from. I think that's enough about astrology in general. So I want to talk about Pluto first. I'm going to start at the furthest reaches and work my way in. And I probably won't get past Jupiter if we're lucky, but that's fine. Because in a couple weeks, the tighter planets, the ones closer to the sun, they tend to move a lot quicker actually. So they move faster through the zodiac versus Pluto, which takes their sweet time. So Pluto has been transiting Capricorn generally since late 2008 and will do so until spring of 2023. So on the one hand, this outer planet, the farthest out planet, who, like, I don't know if he's a planetoid, minor planet, dwarf planet, asteroid, you know, it's like they're constantly, the scientists are constantly changing that distinction. It doesn't matter for me. But Pluto has been moving through the sign of Capricorn for this significant chunk of time, right? And so, so for some of you, as long as you've been alive, and and so we look at the outer planets one as markers of generation. So the Pluto and Scorpio generation, that's us millennials essentially, which puts the Pluto in Sag generation is kind of the Gen Zs, which is super interesting. If we want to talk about that, I could do a whole show on that stuff. And so so basically, what is the current generation? The TikToks is what I call them. Would they have a name? The Zoomers? Is that what they're called? That's the Pluto and Capricorn, which is very interesting too, to put those names together, you know, in terms of what they mean. So the Pluto generation that's happening right now, and all of us are living through the influence of that. Of course, it's a distant planet, so it doesn't have as profound influence on everyone as it does, as say like Mercury does, or like the sun, you know, like we really feel as we're moving through the seasons, like, wow, it's really Cancer season right now. You know what I mean? It's got a whole different gravity to it. But Pluto itself, for me, is really about, if all of the planets are locating for me these different sort of primary energetic forces that govern the incarnate universe, Pluto to me has something of death, but it's more about the mulching and the decomposition of the thing that sucks, you know, dead stuff down into the earth and compresses it and creates something new into it. So it's all those different processes. It also, to me, speaks of the void, of like the space, the darkness, the nothingness that's in the middle of everything. Because I think in that void place, there's a deep learning to be had about this experience of form. Because to get really kind of out there for a second, you know, we have matter. We're all incarnate beings. But even the physicists tell us that most matter is mostly empty space. And then what animates matter is energy. And the physicists also tell us, I'm butchering physics obviously, but that matter and energy are in this constant state of moving between one another, which gets roughly analogous to yin and yang. But in between that, the physicists also tell us that there's dark matter and dark energy, which are hypothetical things that we have no way to quantify them. But most of everything is that. And there's no way for our understanding of the universe to work without this hypothetical right now. So that's very bizarre. And I think there's something to that. And I think there's something, it's kind of like the H.P. Lovecraft, like staring into the void, like, oh, you know, if you're an uninitiated Victorian era, super repressed, you know what I mean? like white dude. Yeah, the void is pretty fucking scary. If you're like a fierce, you know, goddess worshipping power bottom in 2021, you're like, yes, the void. That's my mom. You know what I mean? So there's something really powerful to Pluto's sort of mapping and embodiment of the void. But what does that mean as Pluto's transiting? The power bottoms. I love y'all. Pluto in transit is a really interesting feeling. And you know, I've only felt 3 Pluto transits throughout my life. And I've only been really conscious during this most recent one of Pluto and Capricorn. What happened in 2008? Oh, a big financial crash. Go fucking figure. You know what I mean? So Pluto and Capricorn, there's a lot being mulched around the traditional holdings of Capricorn. Power, leadership, manifestation. If we get underneath capitalism and we sort of dismantle capitalism down to its essence, it's Capricorn is really the way in which we organize materially in space and time as humans. Capricorn carries a lot of the energy of the father, and all of us needing to have that, to be our own daddy to a certain degree, as if we're really spiritual adults, standing out in the world as people that are manifesting all the time, that are doing things. It has a lot to do with work in the world. And so Pluto is also, but Pluto as the recycler is right now dredging up a lot of waste, a lot of extreme repression at the cost of this Capricorn energy that's gone wildly into excess and shadow in our time. And this energy, and that really, you know, all the earth signs get a real bad rap in a hyper-capitalist era and system, because you know, it's like you see a lot of us as we're moving to the Aquarian age. You see a lot of spiritual people, of people, you know, with ethics and values, just completely eschewing material goods completely, like we just, it's all light, it's all love, we need to just like forget about all this. But it's like, yeah, but like, what are you gonna eat tomorrow, today? And where are you gonna shit? You know, like, because if you shit in the wrong place, we all get dysentery and die. So it's like there's that aspect to Pluto. And right now we're really seeing as Pluto is mulching up. You know, one thing that happens deep in the earth is things get highly compressed. And if the earth's natural processes are really allowed to do their thing unfettered, we get really powerful gifts that are really truly mysterious, like oil, like minerals, like these really, you know, like you see these geodes from, you know, mines in South America that are just so bizarre and intricate and beautiful. And it's like, what is the function of that? Why did life create such beauty that seemingly has no function? You know, like I don't know, who's a funny day trader to make fun of? Jeff Bezos was like, well, the function is that so I can make some fucking money selling that shit on Amazon. You know what I mean? What is the function of lithium? You know, but those are the things that are coming up as Pluto's been churning through Capricorn, I think, is really us looking at that. It's like, what if that actually at its depth, at essence, had a purpose on its own, being left unfettered there? You know, different indigenous cultures had all kind of teachings about what we should and shouldn't do relative to things we find in the earth. But a core teaching is just you ask the stone before you pick it up and take it home. You know what I mean? You definitely ask the mountain before you strip mine it. Most of the mountains probably would say no. They've got shit going on that we don't understand. Radiation in there. Noxious gases in there. And look at all the insanity that we have brought out in the industrial age. So I think a lot of that is being brought to bear with this Pluto transit generally. And the more social manifestation of that, the different ways in which we organize power and locate power, even the whole conception of power as a thing that people hold, that some people have and some people don't, that's really getting just mulched out. Pluto's like, no. And I think there's, you know, just like volcanoes erupt, just like shit comes up, Pluto is just a natural function of reality, of life. There's a natural need for things that were buried, that decayed, that experienced that extreme geological compression. Eventually, some of them are going to explode. You know, that's just part of what happens. And so, and eventually it's all going to go back to being void, you know, probably. Or who knows, maybe we all collapse into some big singularity that explodes into the new universe. Pluto probably knows a lot about that. So what does that mean right now? That takes us to Uranus. So Uranus is, to give a little context, you probably heard way too much about the Pluto-Saturn synod, how there were all these little links made historically, really cool stuff. Because for years I was reading, there's going to be like a big crazy financial, like it's going to be the next depression. There's probably going to be a pandemic. There's even someone who working with the Pluto-Saturn synod where they linked in Capricorn this previous last January, December-ish area. And there was even like a blog of an astrologer, you know, because some astrologers are really, really good at that really finite sense of prediction. They get real Nostradamus on it. And someone was like, yeah, there's probably going to be a global pandemic and this is what it looks like. And they basically charted out the whole pandemic. Why we should listen to astrologers? Hello, you know, but the right ones. But, and more power to that woman, I think she was. But what, you know, what does it feel like to know that? And, you know, I was reading all those predictions for years and it was very confirming for me as someone who really works with astrology to see, oh shit, it's happening. But it didn't make it suck any less. It really sucked, and it still sucks. And I think we're probably going to see through 2023 and ramifications going even, there's other stuff going on, obviously, than Pluto transit. But it's like the economy is not good right now, guys, and we're not going to just make a recovery. Pluto is like, no. This whole economy is basically null and void. This entire system of value, which is a real big earth sign thing in the zodiac, we're seeing where it has created a lot of pollution. We're seeing where it has trapped certain things that must be brought out into light. We're seeing how it has unearthed the wrong things in some senses that actually should stay in the earth. So there's just a lot of that happening right now. So what that takes us to currently is Uranus's transit right now. And so Uranus is actually in Taurus. So that puts it at a trine. In traditional astrology, we tend to think of the trine. So that's where you're in the same element. So Earth is Capricorn, Taurus, and Virgo. So if you're trine, you get a benefit from that. And it's interesting because Taurus and Capricorn operate very different based on their modality. So you have the element, earth, air, fire, water. You have the modality, which is fixed for Taurus, cardinal for Capricorn, mutable for Virgo. They couldn't be more different, but they're happening in the same element, so they have the same fundamental medium of the material world, of the stuff, versus the air signs, which are our fundamental medium is concept, it's idea, it's speech, that kind of stuff. Very different than, right here, this desk, this floor, this geode, whatever it is. So Uranus trining Pluto in this general trine. I read for the collective with these big orbs. So an orb is where, you decide how close in degrees in the zodiac the signs and the planets need to be in order to make to qualify as something that you're reading. For the collective, for 8 billion of us, I'm reading pretty big orbs. I'm reading whole sign orbs, essentially. So Uranus trining Taurus generally from 2018 to 2026, trining Pluto in Capricorn. So until 2023, we have this like real serious opportunity happening. Now Uranus has a similarly disruptive and also similarly like generationally diffuse energy as Pluto. I'm almost at 40 minutes. I probably don't have enough time to talk about Saturn. I'll dip in and talk about it because Uranus and Saturn are really linked. So you can't really talk about one without the other, maybe, if I'm framing this for those that don't know much about astrology. So for me, creationally, we move from Pluto, which is that void at the origin of all things, to Uranus, which is that more sky-like, starry, heavenly void. It's a little more like the oneness, but it's a little more approachable for us. And in the myths, and there's a duality, right? There's Pluto on the one hand and the sun on the other end. So the void and the light, which is like, the opposite of the void. It's like, hello, heaviest minerals. It's like nothing. And over here is heaviest minerals, nuclear fission, creating heat and light and very heavy, and everything orbits me. And so you have that. So Uranus is, in the old Greek myths, the pre-Greek myths, Uranus was just the sky that was everything, the cosmos, this whole blankety sort of sky daddy father, but also like, very androgynous, obviously, because if you're everything, you're not just like a dude with a dick. And Gaia was the earth, is in some sense the twin of Uranus. And so she's obviously not just a woman, a cis woman. She's this very chthonic, sort of terrestrial, not necessarily the biggest planet versus Uranus, which is a big old gas giant, but a really robust and fertile planet with so much going on, right? And for me, I read Gaia in a lot of different places in the zodiac, because obviously we don't read the earth in a chart. Maybe that's not obvious to everyone. But we do have the houses. So the houses are one place where I look for the earth. And if you look at the houses in one way, they all look like a little asterisk, which is the symbol for the asteroid of Juno, who in ancient times is an earth mother. I also read the 4 primary, like, feminine asteroids: Ceres, Pallas, Juno, and Vesta, which were kind of revealed to us through the work of Demetra George. Love her. I read those 4 also as the Earth in the chart in some way. They're all kind of aspects of the Earth. Yeah, so that's, and then I also read primarily the houses, specifically that I consider like the earthiest ones for whatever reason, though they all are the rising and the descendant, so the 1st and the 7th, and then the deer and the midheaven, so the 4th and the 10th. So those are the places where I locate Gaia the most in the chart. But essentially, we're all, it's all Gaia because we're all humans on the Earth, whatever. So Uranus was sort of Gaia's big, diffuse cosmic lover. Uranus is so much about pure possibility, pure potential, pure opportunity, pure concept before we have to deal with anything terrestrial in any way. Isn't that just so fun? I'm a quite Uranian person. I'm a double Aquarius with Mercury in Aquarius. So I'm just like super down with all of that. Super down with the possibility. But then when it comes time to getting people's help to actually manifest the possibility and the resources that I need and putting all the work in, that's where it's like, fuck. Okay. So we have that. We have this great void teacher coming through, destroying stuff, churning stuff up, like revealing hidden resources that have been buried. A good example of that is all the ways in which we find that, like token diversity in governments or whatever is crappy. But when you actually give everyone a seat at the table, particularly the people that were like enslaved a few generations ago, particularly like the women who have been, held under the yoke of this very shadowy Capricorn patriarchy for thousands of years in different forms, when you really bring that stuff to the table, it's so much richness coming up. It's so much. And similarly with trauma, Pluto is really bringing up for us, for each generation, we have this imperative to bring out that which was repressed, that which was hidden from the light. And actually we find, as much as it sucks, for example, my Pluto and Scorpio generation, my millennials, we have brought up so much of our trauma in this new way, this very Scorpio aspect of our trauma, sexual trauma, how prevalent rape and incest actually has been throughout recorded history and how much it has not been given light. We bring this stuff up and we actually find jewels from it, which isn't to just like polish it over and be like, oh, it's just great that you got molested or whatever. It's like, but there's a value to be found. The true journey down into that underworld place and to come up, it's really, there's a piece of Persephone's journey to that, of like really journeying into the shittiest parts of human life, because they're just there. They're there in every culture at every time. If you do past life work or shamanic like ancestral work, like you just see it. People make shitty mistakes. We have finite resources, we have finite lives, and the world is crazy. There's thunderstorms, there's volcanoes, there's all this crazy shit happening. Plus other people make shitty mistakes, but when we really bring that stuff to light and actually allow those trauma processes, those wounds to move through their full process, they really yield new gifts that weren't there before. So I think that's one of the Pluto magics that's happening. It's similar to doing shadow work in my shamanic, in the shamanic teachings of my teacher, Christina Pratt, where we work with this energy whose whole specialty is shadow. And it's like, yeah, it sucks so bad that like some of your best qualities were put into the shadow due to shame and judgment and violence that you experienced as a child. But then when you're reclaiming them as allies, it's for me, I'm like, well, there's this level of magic to actually having this now for the second time, actually having had to go through that whole gnarly journey and then bringing that back out into the light, where it's like, it's almost more amazing than it would have been if I just grew up in some utopia, which none of us did and none of us ever will. So enough about Pluto. So Uranus trining in Taurus, the Pluto and Capricorn, I think there's this really beautiful imperative happening. I mean, we're just seeing it everywhere, to really reassess our value systems and really reassess how we even consider value, what we even consider valuable. Money is just scraping the surface. It goes so much deeper. I think if you really pull it down to essence, Uranus and Taurus is really giving us that deep infusion of the gift model actually can work. You know what I mean? It's like there's a way in which value has nothing to do with anything even quantifiable, even when we're talking about the earth. And not to deny the earth its value, or the matter, the substance itself its value, but it's like food, for example. We don't have food if not for the sun. The sun pumps out kilowatts, immeasurable energy that we could never hope to capture through a sun's lifetime. And Jeff Bezos, don't you fucking dare. You know what I mean? Elon Musk, hands off the goddamn sun, you fucking moron. The energy is just so immeasurable, and if you really think of that at a pure essence, it's such a gift. It's such a generous gift. The sun it's actually expending itself through giving us this energy. It's the only reason we can grow food on this planet. You're eating the gift of sunlight every time you eat. That's the whole thing here, is just energy being made form. And then you poop it out, turns into methane in the fucking, at the poop farm where they throw all the waste, and it creates more warmth, blah, blah, blah. So it's all these different, it's this real winnowing down to essence. Or, to put it in Uranian terms, it's getting really big and looking down. It's that like, well, we've gone to Mars, we've gone to the moon, and now we can see the blue planet. Holy shit! Like, my whole frame of reference has just been detonated. What the fuck? And that happened at a very Uranian time. We're in kind of this movement into the Aquarian age, in general. If you look up, I'm not the person to relate this, but if you look up the discovery and the naming of Uranus, from an astrological perspective, I think maybe Demetra George actually has an article on this on her website, but she might not be the one. I might be misattributing that. But it's really interesting because Uranus, as you may not understand, is actually the only Greek name in the pantheon, which is so odd and so Uranus. What would the Roman name would have been Uranus or something like that, which doesn't make sense to us because we've since the 1700s we've thought of this planet as Uranus. Or maybe it was more in the 1800s. Was it Percival Lowell that coined the name? I'm not sure. I'm not the history buff that I could be or should be to talk about it on a podcast. But so the idea of Uranus to me is really about bringing the cosmic perspective, and Uranus and Taurus is so interesting. It's bringing the cosmic perspective into the very Taurian qualities of farming, economics to a certain degree, but it's a very personal sense of economics in Taurus. It's very like what I have and why I have it, where it comes from, giving thanks, the flow of reciprocity and gratitude. In Quechua speaking culture, they call it Aini. We've been working with this a lot in my shamanic community, of this understanding of it's not just reciprocity. It's literally everything. It's everything functions in this way. And if we don't understand that, we're going to go extinct. So it's one of those cool things. I see that with the generation being born with Uranus and Taurus. Like my nephew, for example, he's got some serious Taurus placements. I have another friend who had a child recently, similar. And that whole generation, this whole generation in this 6-ish years has Uranus and Taurus. And it's really interesting to think of what imperatives they will take from that. Because it's not just a transit that's happening for us now between 2018 and 2026, and this particular place of, the 2018 to 2023, where Uranus and Pluto, we're getting both the cosmic perspective on what is really valuable and the churn upwards of what has been repressed due to this really fucked up value system that has been in place. So that 5-year opportunity is really fertile for everyone, and it's going to be more fertile depending on, or differently fertile depending on what personal placements you have. But each transit is also a generational stamp. So you can also look back. My generation is Uranus and Sagittarius. And so I look at that and it's like, yeah, we are quite cosmic, and we're also quite cosmic about our escape habits and our escapism, the sort of Sagittarian and shadow things. There's a lot more to say about that. But it's this imperative throughout my life to innovate around belief systems in general, around this very Sagittarian thing, which is also quite Uranian, is of looking up at the stars to find meaning. You know, like really looking off into the distance and letting the horizon sort of feed you back some inspiration for what you're doing here and now. You know, just watching a beautiful sunset, and like how that, if you really receive that into your body and let that drive your actions, like what does that compel you to create? So that's my generation's imperative around Uranus, I think. And so the Uranian imperative in general is, I think, to innovate, to bring a new perspective to something, not just for innovation's sake, because it's not just Elon Musk, for example. You know, it's not just, I didn't get enough love in my childhood, but I'm good at like new things. So here's a bazillion new things. You know, it's like, here's some new ideas. Which, if you really look at those innovation for innovation's sake people, they're like the rebel without a cause. They're not really that new. And the Uranus thing, it's cyclical still. And the cosmos is probably cyclical. So if Uranus is this embodiment of the whole cosmos, there are other universes that probably happened before this one. There's probably going to be one that happens after this one. You know, or even, who knows, maybe a million. Some of the physicists say there's many interacting worlds or dimensions or qualities of being. So we're, you know, it's not about originality necessarily. It's just about a new way relative to the now, and and because Uranus lives in that orbit to Gaia, it's about there is a grounding to it, because if it's not grounded, it just disperses into space. Which is great. Like, look, the nebulas that we see in the, you know, on Neil deGrasse Tyson's Twitter, whatever, like, those are beautiful, but like, how do I bring that down to my life? You know what I mean? What does that give me? And a really cool example of that is the way Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about how his understanding of science and his pursuit of science. I don't think he's like the best example of things. I'm sure I feel like he got canceled recently, and I'm not remembering why, but like, how any true scientist, how their pursuit of science really brought them to this new sense of being in the world. So I think that's Uranus. You know, if you look at the creation story, one of them, I don't remember if it's Homer or Hesiod or Plato, one of those old Greek poets talking about the creation of the world in these different stages. There was this Uranian stage of where everything was just like Gaia and Uranus fucking, essentially, you know, at the horizon line, the earth and the sky. And then they like, this is very Plutonian, they created these like ugly children, and they ended up getting locked in the basement. And that's where things started to get kind of weird, which I think has a lot to say about the dark side of the Uranus thing. Of like, well, newness for newness sake isn't necessarily going to create the most beautiful things. And if you don't own up to the fact that some of your creations might be kind of whack, if you don't give them a proper and honorable death, then they might rise up with your child like Saturn did, and, you know, freed all the giants and monsters from Tartarus, and they ended up castrating Uranus. So the castration of Uranus is this really evocative image. There's some really cool paintings like through classical art history of that. And I think of that a lot as well, because on the one hand, Uranus has this really childlike energy, which we're seeing right now with like people moving back onto the land. Even really dumb, ignorant people that are like, holy crap, being a farmer is insanely hard, and I'm wasting all these resources making this Instagram about my stupid urban farm or whatever. No offense. But like, but it's still really valuable. You know what I mean? Like the naivete. Because someone has to relearn this shit, right? Someone actually does need to innovate our food system on every level. And in the same sense that these more technological, you know, when they're really grounded, when they're really kind of birthed up and sort of birthed from that Gaia-Uranus connection. You know, like I've read some cool things about some weird, like, I don't know, technological farming innovations in Europe and places like that. You know, it's like some of that stuff could be really gorgeous especially if we're really grounded in that very Uranian, everything has a spirit, we are all one place, very animist sense. So that's very childlike on the one hand, it's very adolescent on the other, in terms of like that like, oh my gosh, like, you know, it's like that, like, I can just like lay here and have sex with my lover, the earth, you know, forever. Which is essentially what the sky still does, if Uranus still embodies that. And then there's that really interesting place of Uranus being the father, a pretty bad father of all of these later generations of energies, which I think really shows us as Saturn comes in and castrates Uranus, it's really about, we can't just be floating in cosmic oneness forever. We can't just be primal sky and primal earth, which is like sulfur, basically, like, you know, it's like not that hospitable. Saturn comes in, castrates his father, and essentially making Uranus like a gorgeous kind of androgen in some sense. And Saturn brings in the age of form, the age of manifestation, where we start to see a really different level of embodiment and personification, where it's not just the sky, but it's Saturn, who is time, who is father, who is reaper. So those are things that I find interesting that's happening right now. It's not what I meant to cover, but it's what came out. So great. I'll try to keep doing these kind of regularly. Pluto is retrograde to ground this, and Pluto moves real slow. I don't remember how long the retrograde is lasting. Look it up. Just look up Pluto retrograde 2021. But it's really an opportunity to revisit some of the crap that's been churned up. Watch out for the QAnons. Watch out for your QAnon neighbor. Go make that bridge. Let your trauma that you've actually gone through the healing around, let the ways in which you've been Me Too'd, your patriarchal, wound, heal through that so that you can go and actually be the bridge to that person's belonging, so that that person doesn't storm the fucking Capitol or do whatever else crap they're planning. You know what I mean? I'm not to put that on all of us that have been traumatized, but it's like, metaphorically, let the trauma really come up. Let the shit that's being churned up. How triggered were you? Like, you know what I mean? I've been hanging out in anarchist circles like my entire adult life, talking about violently overthrowing this oppressive state, and how horrible it felt to watch the insurrection. Like, it was just like, so the wrong people doing it for the wrong reasons, doing it in the wrong way, just in this ugly, ugly way. It just felt like being spit in my face. You know what I mean? Let that stuff come up. Let the shit, because that really, really triggered some deep childhood safety fears in me that I really needed to work in. And they're coming up because I'm like, no matter how faithfully I approach my spiritual practice, people with integrity get murdered by mobs. It's just something that happens in human history, happened to many of my ancestors. Many of my ancestors perpetrated the murder as well. So letting this stuff come up, letting the past come up, working with ancestry, that's another whole piece that I didn't even talk about around Capricorn, working with paternity and lineage, dealing with your daddy issues, all of that stuff is rising to the surface. Let it, and dig for the gold, dig for the gems. And as it's retrograding, look at the places where it was, look at where it's going back again, and let it bring you back into that. We have not processed COVID, y'all. A collective trauma requires a collective processing. We haven't even come close. You can't process as a collective without communities. You can't process as community without families, or at least an intact community of individuals. You can't process any of that, like, if you're not an intact individual yourself. So letting all of that kind of churn and metabolize. But the earth has the wisdom. The void, deeper, older, darker, wider than everything, has the wisdom of that metabolization. The void who metabolizes universes can help us metabolize trauma. So talk to Pluto. The Uranus, look for the ways in which you're being driven to innovate in regards to your resources, whatever lays for you in Taurus, body stuff, food stuff, beauty, you know, like our understanding of beauty. Is your understanding of beauty only like House of Gaga, like, you know, like some 21-year-old gay person designed this, but we're selling it for $1 million on Etsy, whatever, you know? It's like, let your sense of beauty come to ground. What can you make with your hands? So that those are my little leavings with Pluto and Uranus. We only got to 2 planets. I talk too much. So I'm gonna just call us out. Thank you so much for joining me. You're welcome to donate for me to continue this work. You're also welcome to give to an organization benefiting Black trans women, or an organization benefiting Indigenous solidarity. I'm in Kansas City. If you want to donate towards my land, you can give to Casey Tennant's Fund or to the Kansas City Indian Center. Yeah, but I also, I do, if you feel called to donate to me, I'm happy to receive it, because it's not like I like don't need money or anything like that. It's just not my main priority for doing this. You know, maybe I should listen to the Pluto and Uranus a little bit. You know, maybe I just need to like ask for what I think I need. So yeah, donate. It's my Venmo is just my first and last name with a hyphen between them. And yeah, and I'm available for private bookings, group bookings, whatever, doing energy body stuff, spirit work, and astrology. And I like to do them all at once, so that's the best. It's the trifecta. So yeah, okay, so thanks for being here. I give deep honoring and gratitude to all the beings and energies that gathered around and held this space with us and moved through me and moved through all those that joined us. To the ancestral helping spirits for dreaming a better future so that we could be here and dreaming us into existence. For the spirits of Saturn bringing, you know, concept into form, and Uranus bringing more forms, more concepts to even, you know, think about manifesting, and Pluto, you great metabolizing void yourself, and all the other beings and energies that leaned in with us. To the earth below, the sky above, the elements, the each direction, the spirits of the land and the great spirits of the land, and all the other helping spirits that gathered here with us. Thank you so much. Go if you must, stay if you can. We release you with all of our love and all of our gratitude. Hail and farewell. We dissolve this circle, we release this space, and I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your day or night or whatever.